Well, there's a couple schools of thought about this Missouri LSU game. Are the Missouri Tigers going to get an angry version of the LSU Tigers or a motivated one? Or are they giving up on the season? Let's find out. I'm going to ask Caroline Fenton all that and more on this special crossover edition of Locked On Mizzou and Locked On LSU.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And I'm very happy to join another member of the Locked On Podcast Network with me today. It's Caroline Fenton of Locked On LSU. Caroline, I know you guys are probably a little disappointed that you're off to a 2-loss start here, but otherwise, how are things going with you?
Well, yeah, disappointed, I think, would be an understatement, as you can imagine. But, it's just me personally, I'm okay. Had enough time to recover after that Ole Miss game. It was absolutely a heartbreaker. But looking forward to getting another opportunity this weekend in Columbia.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the Ole Miss game. This kind of, in my opinion, promises to be another exciting shootout, it seems to me. But, I've followed your X feed in particular, Caroline, and I've noticed at times you haven't seemed like you're that thrilled with Brian Kelly necessarily. Where are you about halfway into year 2 with Brian Kelly?
Yeah, I think that I have to separate Brian Kelly from the rest of the coaching staff. As far as Brian Kelly is concerned, of course, there are more blowouts than you would have liked. Going back to last season, you get blown out at home against Tennessee. You lose a rough game against Florida State to start the 2022 season, and then get blown out by Florida State again at the start of the 2022 season. You get blown out by Georgia in the SEC championship. And of course, Georgia's going to blow out a lot of teams, but still, it's the idea of, for the most part, when LSU loses, they lose bad. And it's either like a blowout score, or you lose because of dumb special teams mistakes, or you lose because your defense can't stop anyone. So, of course, that's frustrating. But overall, with Brian Kelly, you're a year and a half in. You win the SEC West in year 1. You beat Nick Saban in year 1. That's something that Lane Kiffin still hasn't done at Ole Miss. That's something that took Jimbo Fisher a long time to do at Texas A&M. LSU currently has the 10th overall ranked recruiting class in the 2024 class, the number 6 overall ranked recruiting class in 2023. So for right now, I'm pleased with Brian Kelly, especially given what he took over after that 2021 season. Coach O fired in the middle of the season, and you had 38 scholarship players, with 6 and 7 was the number 7 team, last team in the SEC West. Brian Kelly didn't have a lot to work with going into the 2022 season, and I think he's done a pretty good job with what he's got. Now, Matt House is the one that I am not pleased with whatsoever. And this is the interesting thing to me, John, is Matt House, defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
LSU had a pretty decent defense last year without Mason Smith, and with the secondary that they had to rebuild through the transfer portal. So this year you have Harold Perkins in his second year. You have Mason Smith back, and you also have a secondary that you had to rebuild for the transfer portal in the second year, but the defense is significantly worse. That, to me, falls on coaching. At 34 missed tackles against Ole Miss, that, to me, falls on coaching. Harold Perkins has been he was mismanaged in the offseason against Florida State. He was in an unnatural position for him. That's on coaching. So all of the defensive woes, of course you have to go out there and execute. It is about the Jimmies and Joes, but overall I think the defensive problems falls on the X's and O's, and that's on coaching, and that's on defensive coordinator Matt House.
Yeah, I actually watched all the snaps from that Ole Miss game, and what I saw a lot of times from that LSU back end was just miscommunications galore. So it's definitely not all about just motivation. It is just about actual execution. So,
Right.
Caroline, like I said in that cold open there, are you leaning toward this is going to be an LSU team that is saying, hey, we got to save our season here in Columbia, Missouri. We're going to be focused to play? Or do you think this is a unit that is going, gosh, we didn't think we'd have 2 losses already. What's going on? What do you think? What are you leaning more toward?
I do truly believe that was a wake-up game. at Ole Miss, that was we got to get our stuff together, because I was a little bit concerned going into this season. LSU was getting so much love. Number 5 ranked
Right.
team in the AP preseason poll. A lot of people picking LSU to win the SEC West.
Yep.
In a down year for the SEC West, I thought, how does this coaching staff keep this team motivated? It's easy to motivate a team the year prior when you're not a preseason ranked team, when nobody expects anything from you. So I'm thinking that was a wake up game, because I look at last season, midway through the year, similarly to the Ole Miss loss, LSU had a wake up game, a blowout loss against Tennessee at home. And after that, LSU went on its best 3-game streak of the season. You beat Ole Miss, blow Ole Miss out. You beat Florida, and then you beat Alabama. That was the Jayden Daniels' best 3 stretch of games. That was the defense's best 3 stretch of games. So I think that had something to do with, all right, we're in midseason form. And I also do think it had something to do with a little bit of a wake-up call and a little bit of a motivation of, hey, like, we need to get our stuff together. So I at least hope that was that Ole Miss game has a similar effect, a wake up realization, get right game.
So you do think probably that I can assume you do think this LSU defense has enough talent, has enough time to maybe turn it around this season, and heck, maybe it could happen here in a couple days.
So let me answer that question in 2 different parts. The secondary, no, I do not. I think that the secondary, it is what it is. It was a concern going into this season because they had so few returning pieces coming back. Only 1 scholarship corner returning from the 2022 season, and that was LaTerrence Welch, who had very few snaps last year. But they picked up pieces of the transfer portal that I think we're seeing just are not at a high enough level and just simply don't have enough talent. That's no disrespect to those guys in those programs, but picked up corners from Syracuse and Southeastern Louisiana and from Marshall. And those players, they've been playing hard and they've been doing everything that they can. But sometimes there's just a talent differential and an expectation at LSU that they just simply can't meet. The defensive line, however, I think that's salvageable. I think LSU's got at least 3, if not more, future first-round picks on that defensive line. And Mason Smith and Harold Perkins, floating around on the outside, and also with Mekhi Wingo. You got so much talent. You got veterans on the defensive line and on that front 7. I think that has just been, a coaching issue, a mismanagement issue, maybe a coming back from injury for Mason Smith kind of issue. So I think that the defensive line hasn't even really scratched what it's capable of.
Well, yeah, obviously some real concerns there for LSU's defense. Obviously, Missouri fans very familiar with Mekhi Wingo, the former Tiger. We miss him for sure, but I kind of understand, honestly, why he ended up going down there following his old high school coach. Some unusual circumstances there. Good to see him doing well, honestly, but hopefully Missouri can maybe put him on his butt a couple times with their offensive line. That would be fun to see. But, obviously it seems like we've started a little negative here with the defense for LSU. Plenty of positives to talk about the LSU offense. Just a really, really incredibly talented group that, frankly, I was a little bit scared after watching them against Ole Miss. So it's not all bad for the LSU Tigers whatsoever. So you know what, Caroline, let's talk about Jayden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, that whole group coming up. But first, I want to tell you guys about eBay Motors, because this time of year, you know what? You got to be looking at your car, and it's all about passion, drive, and patience. That's what brings home the winning trophy, and it's what helps keep your ride or die vehicle alive. You see, eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. And with all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit. Only available to U.S. customers. And this season, Locked On is taking its coverage up a notch with Locked On College Football Kickoff Live each Friday. Locked On going live at 10 a.m. Central on every Locked On College YouTube channel, including Locked On Mizzou and Locked On LSU. Got the playoff implications, rivalry games, going in depth like, frankly, only our stable of Locked On College hosts can, covering their team every day. Find Locked On College Football Kickoff Live every Friday at 10 a.m. Central on any Locked On College YouTube channel. You won't want to miss it. And I tell you, Caroline, after watching LSU's offense this past weekend against Ole Miss, boy, there's not a lot of weaknesses. I'll tell you that. Jayden Daniels, to me, a guy I studied a lot a couple off seasons ago because Missouri was looking at him in the transfer portal. Obviously, we know where he ended up. But to my eyes, a guy who's a really dynamic runner who's improved a ton as a passer. Now he's got a ton of weapons at his disposal. Is there any real weakness here for the LSU offense?
It doesn't look like it, honestly. I would say that maybe the weakness that has been exposed, maybe in that first half against Arkansas and the second half against Florida State, is when a defensive line shuts down Jayden Daniels' mobility. It's the transition into taking that second level and relying solely on the passing game. But that's something that we've seen Jayden Daniels can do. And that's something that maybe he struggled with last year, that it was, if the first read wasn't there, it's all right, let me use my legs and pick up a few yards where I can. This season, the passing game has evolved so much. And I think that has something to do with Jayden Daniels' development and how he can feel more comfortable sitting back in the pocket and going through his progressions and going through his reads. And it also has to do with the pass catchers. That duo of Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas is the best duo that LSU has had since Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. And that 2019 team, that is not a comparison that I take very lightly. I look at Logan Diggs. He is a running back transfer from Notre Dame, and he has evolved as being LSU's go-to number one workhorse back. I think he's the best running back that LSU has had since Clyde Edwards-Helaire in that 2019 season. So this offense just has so many layers to it, and there's so much talent on it. The offensive line has struggled a little bit maybe earlier in the season with penalties, a lot of false start penalties that have just been frustrating to watch. But overall, this LSU offense, it is elite. It's elite. It's frustrating to watch how good it is and how bad the defense is, and how the defense is costing Jayden Daniels a Heisman Trophy resume, truly, because that's what Jayden Daniels is doing. That's the numbers that he's putting up, over 400 yards against Ole Miss, not a single interception, 4 touchdowns, and you still lose. It's frustrating to see, but this LSU offense, I mean, it's statistically the best in the SEC, one of the best in college football. It truly, I would put it up there with some of the best offenses in college football, maybe, a Texas, a USC, a Washington. LSU's offense has the makings of being simply that good.
Yeah, I think it's certainly a top 5, at the very least a top 10 unit nationally. I mean, really, that's pretty conservative, I'd say. Again, you just look at it with all those receivers, with his dynamic running ability, with his ability to throw the ball over the top now of a defense that's putting pressure on. Honestly, I've been curious, how do you think Missouri should attack, or at least early in the ball game? I've been thinking, hey, drop back, play zone coverage, drop 7-8 guys into coverage at least early in the game. And then if that doesn't work, then maybe you try to bring some pressure on him. To me, I'd be worried about putting pressure on Daniels and then him getting out of rushing lanes and making big plays with his legs. What's your thoughts, Caroline?
And that's a difficult thing about dropping 7 or 8 back in coverage. That's what Mississippi State did. Mississippi State with the 4-4-3 defense, they don't bring a whole lot of pressure on the quarterback. But Jayden Daniels had so much time to throw. He had all day in the pocket to throw. So if you want to, in a double team the receivers in the backfield, well, that just gives Jayden Daniels time, and it gives the receivers time to get some separation, gives Jayden Daniels time in the pocket to sit back and let those receivers get separation. And if you drop some back into coverage, well, that gives Logan Diggs and Jayden Daniels time, and they can kill you in some of the intermediate passing situations and running the football, because LSU can be totally confident and totally fine just running the football, gain a 5 here, gain a 3 here, gain a 2 here. They're fine with the slow kill, doing it that way, running the football maybe a little bit more conservatively. Because from what I've seen over the past few weeks, LSU is fine running the ball to set up the pass. Getting down the field, maybe getting into Missouri territory, into opponent's territory. And then that's when they deliver maybe the kill shot, 20, 30-yard pass into the end zone. And you've got guys like Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas, and I'll even add Kyron Lacey and Chris Hilton. Maybe
Sure.
guys that aren't as well known, but are still, certified attacks and weapons in the passing game. Guys that can win those one-on-one matchups in the end zone. So that's a difficult thing. I truly don't know. I think the best thing, the most effective defense that we have seen played against LSU is when you take Jayden Daniels' legs away from him, specifically earlier in the game.
Yeah, I tend to think the passing game, probably of both offenses, is going to get theirs in this game, and maybe whoever runs the ball more effectively could end up the victor there. But you know what, Caroline?
Yeah.
Do you have anything that you're curious about from my perspective, from the Missouri perspective, you want to pick my brain on?
Yeah. So I think, I look at Brady Cook and Luther Burden. I mean, that's one of the best quarterback wide receiver duos in the SEC. I have loved Luther Burden. I think that Luther Burden, I think now kind of with the Missouri offense evolving how it has, how much better it looks now that Drink's not calling plays. I think that Luther Burden up until now has been one of the most underrated players in all of college football. But let's say you take Luther Burden away. Let's say maybe that's LSU's defensive game plan, which, I mean, who knows? If that's the game plan, who knows if you can execute it? If you take Luther Burden away, what's the Missouri offense?
Well, the good news is, from Missouri's perspective, is they've really had a bunch of receivers emerge along with Burden this year. Now, Burden was moved from the outside to the slot this season, and that's really been an effective position for him. It just fits his skill set so much more. And frankly, he's only about 5'11". So to be an outside receiver, that's not a perfect, height for that position. But for whatever reason, the slot fits him perfectly. And the good news is Theo Weiss, a transfer from Oklahoma, he's fit rather nicely on the outside. Another guy, Marquise Johnson, a young player that's really kind of came a little bit out of nowhere. He's actually a legacy Tigers, son of a former Tiger, but a guy who was literally won the 100-yard dash, I think, in like the biggest, one of the biggest high schools in Texas a few years ago. His nickname is Speedy. Well, he can also track the ball too. He's a really good receiver, a deep threat that if you're going to concentrate a lot of defensive capital, if you will, on Luther Burden, well, that's going to open up things for Marquise Johnson and for Theo Weiss, to a lesser extent Mookie Cooper, a former 5-star player from Ohio State. Missouri has plenty of receivers right now, so that's not really a big concern.
And looking defensively, I look at LSU and Mizzou. I think they have very similar strengths and very similar weaknesses. That these offenses are so fun to watch. They're two-dimensional. They can run the football. They can throw the football. They've got receivers they feel confident in. They've got quarterbacks they can feel confident in. But Missouri's pass defense has struggled a bit. And I know that this coaching staff loves its corners. I know they believe in the corners. So what has kind of been the disconnect maybe there in the pass defense?
Well, you said it. I think Missouri has really good corners. The top two in particular, Chris Abrams-Drain and Ennis Rakestraw. I think those guys are both potential NFL draft picks, to be sure. But at times, I think you saw it first against Tennessee last season, where Missouri had a really good defense, but they gave up over 700 yards in that game to the Volunteers because over and over again, Josh Heupel was picking on various Missouri safeties in coverage. So as long as you have enough time to get rid of the football, I think there are going to be moments where, in particular, Malik Neighbors is going to be a really, really tough matchup for Missouri. Obviously, he's a tough matchup for everybody in the country. I just think in particular, because the Tigers have struggled at times with safety coverage, I think it's going to be interesting to see how the Tigers try to counteract that. Will they move Ennis Rakestraw inside occasionally to follow Neighbors into the slot? Perhaps they do. Again, maybe more dime coverage, maybe a little bit more zone. Again, I just think it's going to be really important to get this LSU offense in some types of third and longs, because if they can just call whatever they want, I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah, it's fair. And that's one thing that I've noticed is, the third and long situations, even fourth and long. I mean, still, I go back, there's a 4th and 7 against Mississippi State, and they go for it and they score a touchdown. And I'm thinking, what is this? But obviously the 3rd and 3 situations, 3rd and 2, when you can utilize either Jayden Daniels' legs or Logan Diggs or the rest of the running backs. LSU has 8 running backs currently on its roster. That's when it works best. Just pick up a couple of yards here, get the first down, and move forward. But overall, I look at Missouri, and I'm a little bit confused. A close game against Middle Tennessee State, and you come back and you beat number 15th ranked Kansas State. Maybe consistency is, or lack of thereof, from this Missouri team has been difficult for me to truly put my finger on what this Missouri team is. Maybe what's the reason for the lack of consistency from Missouri so far?
Well, I think you just saw a really different offense in the first 2 weeks than you have the last 3. And it's just interesting because in 2022, in week 2, Brady Cook, he had a shoulder labrum injury that required surgery in the offseason. He played through it all of 2022. So Missouri was just a lot of dink and dunk offense, especially in the passing game last year. Well, in the first 2 weeks of 2023, it looked much the same. For whatever reason, against South Dakota and against Middle Tennessee, that's what Missouri decided to do. And frankly, it was frustrating. After week 2 against Middle Tennessee, I was discouraged. I was really discouraged by the offense. But then suddenly in week 3, Missouri opens it up. Suddenly they're doing a lot of play action fakes. They're throwing the ball downfield successfully and repeatedly, by the way. And we've seen that ever since. The last 2 weeks against Memphis and Vanderbilt, kind of the same deal. Now, as you referred to, maybe the inconsistency there, Missouri's been excellent on 1st and 2nd down, standard downs. But if you get them into 3rd down, well, that's been a lot more suspect the last few weeks. So that'll be something interesting to watch against LSU if they can execute a little bit better there. But frankly, Caroline, I just think the last 3 weeks, Missouri has figured out what it is.
Which is, I think I always call it like the first couple of week fallacy, or the September fallacy of football, of, inconsistencies in scheduling. Some teams play Power 5, some teams don't. And
Absolutely.
also keeping in mind, might not know what you want to do, whether it's transfers or young players or a new quarterback or a new coordinator. By week 5, week 6, week 7, we're starting to see these teams coming into full form. They know what their identity is. They know what they want to be. But last one on my end, I know, Columbia is kind of a foreign place for a lot of LSU fans. Of course, played there in 2020, but with COVID year, weird year, not a lot of people got to make the trip. So Missouri at home, what kind of advantage is that for the Tigers? Your Tigers, rather.
Well, I mean, I'll be honest. It's not a night game in Baton Rouge. I'm sure of that, but it's anything short of that. I mean, Missouri, when Missouri is good, when Missouri has a big time game coming into town, a big time program, an opponent like LSU, I mean, it's going to be an electric atmosphere. 11 a.m. or at night, I'm telling you, Missouri fans are going to show up for this game. There's no doubt about that. I don't think you're not going to have to worry about the Tiger faithful being asleep. So again, maybe we would have liked to have had it at 6 p.m. to get a little bit more liquored up at the tailgate. I don't know. But honestly, I think it's actually a good spot. If you think about it, it's the ESPN game following College game day. It's actually a great spot if you're in the PR department at the Missouri Athletic Department. But you know what? Before we get out of here, Caroline, I do want to talk to you about the line over at FanDuel Sportsbook. It's now down to 5.5. Missouri, the underdogs, LSU, the favorites here. Creeping down just a little bit Missouri's way. I have to say, I've been surprised at how high that line is. To me, this is much more of a pick'em type game than it is a LSU favored by a touchdown game. What are your thoughts?
I would agree. When it opened at 6.5, I thought that's going down. And I wouldn't, let's say if I'm Vegas, I would make it more of a 2.5 point spread, because I think that it could very well be one of those games that whoever gets the football last wins. Whoever scores last wins. That was the situation with Arkansas for LSU. Obviously, that was a situation last week with Ole Miss, that it was Ole Miss Ole Miss scored last. So Ole Miss won. And I think that these are two offenses that have the makings of this being an absolute shootout. And it's kind of a management of the clock kind of game. I think the over-under is set at 63.5. Hammer the over. This easily could be a 43-41 kind of outcome.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. And in fact, my prediction, Caroline, I just have a feeling I think, even though I think it's a toss-up game, I'm actually going to lean a little bit Missouri's way, frankly, because of how professional I thought Missouri has been the last 2 weeks against
Mhm.
Vanderbilt, against Memphis. Even though Kansas State's their best win, I was almost more impressed that they came back from what Kansas State fans kept saying, well, that was Missouri's Super Bowl. There was some truth to that. Missouri had had that game circled forever. They were motivated. My point is they had every opportunity in the world to suffer some kind of letdown against Memphis and Vanderbilt, and they took care of business. So this seems like a team that's focused and motivated. So you know what? I'm going to go with the Tigers in a game that you're talking about. Basically, the Tigers have the ball last. Harrison Mevis hits a field goal for the win. I'm going to go 38-35 Missouri. What's your pick,
The
Caroline?
thicker kicker.
The thicker kicker. You got it.
MVP of the season already after that 61-yarder against Kansas State. I'm going to lean just very slightly LSU. And I think this is everything. This is an identity game for LSU. I think that this is an avoiding disaster game for LSU. That, you fall to 3-3, you're going to have some really uncomfortable situations. And you're going to have some really uncomfortable conversations about what this team really truly can be. And I don't think that they want to fall into that situation. That, yeah, you put up, 49 points against Ole Miss and 600 yards of offense against Ole Miss, and you still lost. I think that was an embarrassment. That was an embarrassing loss for that team. I don't think they want to continue to go down that road. I think that they're going into this game incredibly motivated. And I hope that I can look back at the end of this season and say that Ole Miss loss was the best thing that ever happened to this team, because they needed to realize what they needed to do to continue to win games in this conference. And look, this Missouri team is a really good team. This offense has been so fun to watch. But I look at LSU's offense and say, as good as Missouri's is, LSU's has been better through 5 weeks. So I'm going to lean LSU very slightly. I think it's going to be 1, 2, 3 point difference.
I think your point about Missouri and LSU's offense, LSU's being a little bit better, trust them a little bit more. I would agree with you, actually. I just would also say that I trust Missouri's defense more than
Very fair.
LSU. So I
Yeah.
think it's going to be, again, I think we're kind of on the same page, even though we went with our homer picks. But I think we really are on the same page here. It's going to be a good, high-scoring ball game. And hey, Caroline, thanks for joining me, and be sure to check out Caroline if you're in the Nashville area by any chance, right? You're based in Nashville, is that right, Caroline?
Yeah, I'm based in Nashville.
Well, she hosts Caroline, Willie, and D Mace from 11 to 2 daily on 1025 The Game AM. So how about that? 3 hours of radio. I'm impressed.
102.5 FM.
1025 FM.
Yeah,
There you go.
yeah. There you go. But yes, it's a blast. Come check me out if you're in Nashville, and I'll be in Columbia this weekend, so maybe I'll see you there.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I'll buy you a beer. Hit me up.
Will do. Thanks, John.
All right. Thanks.